Hey guys, it's CMAC here. Today we're going to talk about CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous delivery, and continuous deployment. These are all modern application development strategies. Since we need to deliver values, we need to deliver new features, add things to our product as soon as possible. So we need a reliable way of testing and deploying and delivering our code to production as soon as possible. In the past, we used to wait months and months for websites to change, and when they release a change, there might be some issues, some trouble, some problems. Those days are gone. You cannot wait 6 months to release a new feature. So in agile development, basically, let's say every 2 weeks, every week, teams, they need to merge their code, or basically they need to commit their code to the main repository. But how do we make sure if we have 20 teams working on different part of the project, they're not going to break the main branch or main basically code repository? We use a continuous integration, which basically we automate all our tests and we build a pipeline. So we run the code through that pipeline to make sure it passes all the tests, and when it's good, of course it goes to our repository. So and then it builds the deployable version of the software. If it's Spring Boot, it might be Maven build or Gradle. It's going to create the file for you so you can deploy it to your server. So continuous integration is basically the process of automating. Majority of it is process of automating the test and make sure the code, it's not going to break the product, right? And different teams can merge basically their code base on a weekly basis, every other day, whatever the interval is, to the main repository. So one step after that, it comes a continuous delivery, right? So let's say every month, every Tuesday, every second Tuesday of every single month, you have a release. So basically, continuous delivery helps you, by bringing everything to one place, basically helps you to make sure you are ready for the next release, right? So at the night before the release, you're not going to end up having problems that you don't know how to get them fixed. So continuous delivery is a pipeline that guarantees the delivery to the customers, right? But if you want to take this further, like a lot of modern websites these days, they use a concept called continuous deployment. Continuous deployment is the process of building the code, testing the code, and actually moving it to the production. So as you commit the code, it goes through the pipeline, it does all the tests, it creates the build file, it goes and deploys to the different servers, right? And think about it, if you have like 20 servers that's serving millions of users, so you can have different strategies for deployment. You can do like rolling update, which is going to basically update bunch of if you have 20, it's going to just update, let's say, 5 servers at a time. So you will have still 15 servers to serve your customers. Or if you want to keep your capacity, you can just add more capacity, and then as they're ready to join your load balancer to serve more traffic, you can remove the old versions, one by one, until all the servers serve the same in the most recent version. So continuous integration and continuous delivery, of course, it's a modern approach in agile development. If you work for a good company, or if you want to practice it in your small business, it's a very useful tool to learn. So I'm going to walk you through everything. We're going to build a continuous integration, continuous delivery pipeline. It's going to have manual approval. It's going to send you notification. Once you commit the code to the repository, it's basically going to test everything and send the code to the production. It's going to be a very fun video. So without further ado, let's get started. Alright guys, as you can see, this is our Elastic Beanstalk environment that I deployed my Spring Boot application to. And as you can see, the health is okay. And the runtime version, as you can see here, it says CodePipeline deployed the last version. I'm running Java 8. And this is my configuration. As you can see, this Elastic Beanstalk environment is running. And if I go back to my application and run it, you see the application is running. So let me go back, just click on this to make sure it's running. Perfect. So if you haven't watched my Spring Boot application deployment to Elastic Beanstalk, I definitely recommend you guys go back and watch that video, because it's going to help you really understand how to do blue-green deployment on AWS using Elastic Beanstalk. So the application is actually very, very simple, because the whole purpose of this tutorial is basically to show you guys how to create code pipeline using Amazon. So CI/CD, as I mentioned, it's basically continuous integration and continuous delivery, and of course CD can be used for continuous deployment, which is the advanced version of CI/CD pipeline. In this scenario, if you guys take a look, I built a pipeline here that basically says here's the application that uses AWS Code Commit. Again, I have another video regarding AWS Code Commit. It's basically a repository where you can submit your code and track the changes, and you can roll back. You can see all the changes. If you click on this guy, it will show you what has changed in your application. As soon as we make changes to our repository, it will pick up all the changes that AWS CloudWatch will be notified, and all the changes will be deployed to our next stage, which is the build stage. In the build stage, it's basically a place where I can compile and create a deployable WAR file for my Spring Boot application. So it's basically a Maven build. You run mvm install on your machine to create a Spring Boot application deployable file. So this area, which I'm going to show you in detail, it's basically going to create that file. And when the file is ready, it's going to go for an approval, which is going to be a manager or tech lead or whoever is in charge of those deployments. And when it passes all the tests and everything in these sections, it's going to wait for approval. We can of course remove this and directly go to our Elastic Beanstalk, which is basically our deployment stage. But it's a good practice to always have this approval process, so your code directly after commit doesn't go to production. When you approve the changes, our pipeline is going to go ahead and deploy the application that we built in our build section to our final environment, which is Elastic Beanstalk. And of course, our Elastic Beanstalk is sitting behind a load balancer. If the traffic increases, it's going to scale automatically. It's a great practice to run your application. So this is basically CI/CD, continuous deployment, where all these changes automatically from your code repository, as soon as you commit the code, it's going to go through the build and approval and the deploy. Okay, this is our application. As you can see, it's a very basic, simple application. It's just, it's got one controller which returns our page. I'm going to rebuild this and show you guys how it works. But for now, let's just make a change to our website. So I'm going to say, instead of this, I'm going to say this is the new version. So this is a new version of our application. I'm going to save all these changes. I want to check its status. It's, as you can see, I have changed 2 files, let's say, and I want to stage those files first. And then again, I want to do git status. Now they're green. It means they're staged and they're ready for commit. So I'm going to do git commit -m. I'm going to put the comment like this is the new version. There it is. And now they're ready for the final push to our origin, which is master branch. And my AWS code commit is basically sensitive to those changes. And if I go back to my environment now, you guys going to see here that 21 hours ago, let's see if this changes. It should be picked up. There you go. So it's automatically CloudWatch notified my application that there's a new commit that you can go ahead and basically check. Even if I click on this section, you're going to see there it is. Let me show you guys how this works. Now, if you go back down here, in this section, you see I have a change, so the manager can actually see what has changed in the application before approving the application to go to the production, right? So as you can see, the process is building
the WAR file for deploying my application to Elastic Beanstalk. So this is going to take probably a minute or two. I might just pause this video here, but before I pause it, in my application, I do have a test case for the application that it's running. If I basically look at this test case, let's take a look at the test case together. And as you can see, I've annotated this with the test, and it says, okay, my homepage controller, it needs to return a homepage. And this is just very simple test case. As you can see, it should return homepage. And basically, this test will be passed, right? And it's going to let the application to proceed. In case one of those tests fail, the application is going to stop, because the test, when the test is failing, it means the application is no good for production. So this is actually very good for production. So you put all the tests in the build section. Now, since our application is healthy, it's passing all the tests. As you can see, it succeeded. Now it's going for the next stage, which is the approval process. In the approval process, the manager will get notification. I'm going to show you how. You can simply set up SNS notification, and let's say I reviewed all the changes, and I say good to go and perfect, and I'm going to say approved on 8/3, perfect, and I'm going to let it go. I misspelled approved, by the way. I'm going to let it go to the final stage, which is code commit, which is Elastic Beanstalk environment. As you can see, after approval, it's automatically going to deploy my application to Elastic Beanstalk. So the whole purpose of having the CI/CD pipeline is basically the ability to deliver new features for our product as soon as possible. We want to be competitive. We want to be able to deliver value as fast as possible to our customers. As you can see, as soon as I committed this application, this changes to my repository automatically went to my Elastic Beanstalk. In order to double check this process, we're going to go back. If you recall, I changed it to this is a new version. Let's see if we see all the changes. So we just refresh the page, and there you go, you have it. This is the new version. So from my IDE, from my Eclipse or IntelliJ, whatever you're using, to production environment in AWS, I was able to basically pass all these steps and publish the code and deliver the code directly to my production. So what I'm going to do for this case, I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to actually on purpose, I'm going to change this test case, and I'm going to say because I want this to fail, so it should not go to production. So I'm expecting to receive a homepage, right? But on purpose, I say, okay, the result should be one homepage, which is wrong. So this test case should fail, and my application should not be able to make it to my Elastic Beanstalk. And I'm gonna say git add git status. There it is. The one is modified and one is a stage. I'm gonna go ahead and push it to the cloud. Test is going to fail. There it is. And git push origin master. So the test just failed. So my build was not able to pass this basically stage. And the reason we all know, because on purpose I changed the application to basically fail after testing the assertion. So this is what we're going to build, and I'm just going to show you guys. I'm going to rebuild this pipeline so you guys become really familiar in case if you want to build it on your own. So let's get started. The process is actually very simple. We go to pipeline, and then what we're going to do here, we're going to say create new pipeline, and I'm going to say this is my second test. And AWS automatically, it's going to create a role that has access to this pipeline. You can use existing one. In this scenario, I'm just going to go ahead and build a new one. If you click on advanced settings, so this is basically the bucket that code pipeline it's going to use in order to create the artifacts, that's coming out of each stage, and basically store them in a temporary place so they can be used as an input, for the next step in our pipeline. I'm going to just use the default language, default place. You can of course change it to custom location if you want to change it. I'm just going to keep the default and move forward. So it's actually looks like giving me an error here because of the name. Service role is invalid. My second test. I'm just going to go ahead and click on next now. So in the next step, as you can see, I can identify the source of my code, which can be AWS code commit, can be ECR, it can be Amazon S3 or GitHub. So in this scenario, our source is actually code commit. You can of course use the S3. I do have a repository. It's called test app. If you haven't, again, watch my AWS code commit. I definitely recommend you go watch that video. I'm just going to skip those steps and for now focus more on AWS code pipeline. So there are two mechanisms here that we can pick for change detection. One of them is CloudWatch, and AWS CloudWatch is basically monitors the environment and triggers different events based on the matrix that we define. So let's say if you're running EC2 instance, you can trigger events on EC2, for example, CPU utilization, right? And for network input output. So you can measure things using CloudWatch and then trigger events. So in this case, we're going to use CloudWatch to basically, detect all the changes that's going to happen to our code pipeline. So, or we can actually have code pipeline to kind of, go and check for all the changes periodically. So in this scenario, I'm just going to pick the select one, the first one. In the next step, there is going to be actual, a build phase that we have to build here. So you guys can see how we can actually create a build project from scratch. So I'm going to name this test build project. No description. I'm going to just say I'm going to use a manage image and operating system. I'm going to use Ubuntu, or you can use Windows. This is just basically an operating system that will run your Maven file, Maven install, and it's going to create a file. So you need a machine to do that, to handle that creation. And that's going to be, in this case, in a standard image of, I'm going to use the version 2.0, and always use the latest image for this version. Perfect. And I'm going to go ahead and service role, I'm going to create a new one. If you have an existing one, you can just simply use that one. So the important part of this process is this part, where you can actually insert or basically build your commands, in AWS, which gives you an editor, or you can actually include your YAML build spec file in your Spring Boot application. So if you put a file, that is called build spec.yaml in your root folder of your project, so you can just simply go ahead and enter the file name here, right? So you identify the file in this process, but in this case, what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually show you guys the editor that AWS offers. This is basically a build file, right? It's a YAML file where you put all the configurations. So what happens here, as you can see, we have build, we have pre-build, we have post-build, and we have artifacts, which basically, as I mentioned, they're basically output of the entire process. So at the end of the day, we're going to build a Maven file, we're going to build a WAR file that can be deployed to our Elastic Beanstalk application. All right, I just created a simple build file, and I'm going to walk you through all the pieces. So the first one is actually we need the runtime, which I'm using Java OpenJDK version 11 in order to compile this application. You can use JDK version 8 or whatever version you're going to use. For now, I'm just going to stick with version 11. And then, as you can see, I uncommented the build section, and the command that I want to run and I'm interested in is basically nvn install, right? And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to remove this. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a file that is called target test app 1.jar or whatever I'm going to create using this as Spring Boot application. Let's go back to our application. If you recall, our application creates a file that can be deployed to a server in this folder. So if I want to go ahead and demonstrate that, I just can simply go here and do nvn install. And as you're going to see, perfect, pass the test, building the file, there it is. So our application created a file, and then go back, and I'm going to say create this file. It's going to be in target folder, and it's called this file.jar. Perfect, that's going to be my artifact. And of course, if I want to run a test before running the install, I can actually go ahead and run it like this and say nvn test. This way I can run all my test cases to make sure the application is going to work properly. So I'm going to just create this. Now we have the build ready. We can go to the next step, and the next step it's going to be actual deployment. So I'm going to use Elastic Beanstalk application named test, and I'm going to use test environment. Again, if you haven't watched my Elastic Beanstalk deployment, application deployment, you can definitely, I recommend you watch that and you learn how to deploy your application to AWS Elastic Beanstalk. I'm going to click on next. So our pipeline is ready. We're going to go ahead and give it a shot, create pipeline. We're going to wait for the pipeline to be ready. All right, so our first step source is ready. As you can see, just now AWS code committed the code. Now it's going through the code build basically stage, and in this stage, code build is going to use Ubuntu that we picked with all that basic image. It's going to create that WAR file and run that nvm test, nvm install. We're going to wait for code build to finish processing this stage. All right, guys, as you can see, code build was able to create our application, and now we have a WAR file using this code build stage. That basically the output of the stage, which is artifact of this stage, it will be basically input for the next step. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually create one more step. I'm going to go to edit here. I'm just going to show you guys you can add and remove more stages here, right, as you wish. So between the build and code deploy, I want to go ahead and add a manual approval. I'm going to name this manual approval, and the action that I will be taking here in manual approval, it's going to be, as you can see, manual approval. So of course you have many different options that I'm going to let you guys explore, and then they can click and they'll be basically notified there's a new version waiting for their approval. So I'm going to go ahead and add this stage, and as you can see, I can add more actions horizontally. So each stage is basically composed of different actions. You can have one or many actions in every single stage. Every single stage creates an artifact for the next stage. So in this case, if I say I'm done here, and as you can see, we can now go ahead and save this pipeline. So in this stage, So take a look, we have a source and then we have a code build and then we have manual approval. So the code directly is not going to go to our environment in Elastic Beanstalk. You can go ahead and disable transitions. So this means basically if you compile the source for whatever reason, you don't want to let the code to go to the next step, you just click on disable transition, you provide a reason for that, and then this will basically block the the flow. So I'm going to go ahead and release the change. So basically you can assume that I made a commit and the code now it's going to run again. Basically release change has the same impact as committing a new change to a repository. So we're going to wait for code build to build a new version. And then at the next step, the code is going to wait. The pipeline is going to wait for manual approval. And we're going to approve it and let it go to Elastic Beanstalk. So I'm going to pause the video here and wait for manual approval stage. All right, guys, perfect. As you can see, the build stage was successful. Now we are in manual approval. The admin is going to receive a notification through SNS notification that's subscribed to that channel, to that topic, and then it's going to say this looks good, approved, and then it's going to put the date 8/6/19 and then let it go to production or blue-green deployment or whatever environment you set up for your CI/CD pipeline. Again, CI/CD is must know for software developers, DevOps these days, since we want to deliver new features for a product as soon as possible.
All right, guys, we just learned how to build a CI/CD pipeline in AWS. Leave questions and comment down below. Let me know what you think, and I hope you liked it. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I hope to see you soon. Bye.